The Kingdom of Kush was an African civilization that existed long before Egypt's rise to power and prominence. Stretching across vast territories, its legacy has often been overshadowed by the grandeur of its northern neighbor. Yet, Kush's history is not one of mere subjugation or fleeting influence. Rather, it represents a rich and vibrant culture that forged its own path, leaving an indelible mark on the history of Africa and the world. Kush's emergence as a powerful civilization began in the 3rd millennium BCE in what is today Sudan. The civilization flourished along the Nile River, not far from Egypt, in a region that was known for its fertile lands and strategic position. The Kingdom of Kush, also known as the Kingdom of the Black Pharaohs, can be seen as a bridge between the ancient African civilizations of Nubia to the south and Egypt to the north. While Egypt is often regarded as one of the cradles of Western civilization, it was in the Kingdom of Kush where the African roots of this cultural and political heritage first took root. The Kushites were a people with deep connections to their land, their gods, and their ancestors. They were known for their remarkable achievements in architecture, art, and metallurgy, much of which was influenced by the surrounding Nile River Valley. But what set them apart was their resilience, their ability to maintain their identity and autonomy in the face of Egypt's expanding reach. While Egypt sought to expand its empire southward, it encountered fierce resistance from the people of Kush, who were determined to defend their territory and preserve their way of life. The Kingdom of Kush is often depicted as a land of contrasts, where ancient traditions and emerging innovations coexisted harmoniously. The people of Kush were skilled warriors and brilliant strategists, but they were also great builders, artisans, and scholars. Their civilization was marked by a profound respect for the past and a relentless drive to innovate. In this way, Kush can be seen as a precursor to many of the great African empires that would emerge in the centuries to come. The heart of the Kingdom of Kush lay in its capital, Napata, which was situated at the base of Mount Barkal. This sacred mountain was believed to be the dwelling place of the god Ammonius, and it was here that the Kushite kings made their mark in history. The royal family of Kush claimed descent from the gods themselves, and this divine right to rule was central to their identity. It was in Napata that the Kushite kings would build some of the most impressive monuments in Africa, including temples and pyramids that rivaled those of Egypt. These structures were not just expressions of power. They were also symbols of the kingdom's deep spiritual connection to the land and the cosmos. At its height, the Kingdom of Kush controlled vast territories, including parts of Upper Egypt. The Kushite pharaohs were not mere conquerors. They were also respected rulers who saw themselves as protectors of the Egyptian legacy. They ruled with a sense of duty and honor, understanding that their reign was not just about military dominance, but about preserving the sacred traditions of the Nile Valley. The famous 25th dynasty of Egypt, often referred to as the Kushite dynasty, is one of the most significant periods in both Kushite and Egyptian history. During this time, the Kushite pharaohs would ascend the throne in Egypt, bringing with them a new vision of rulership, one that emphasized spiritual unity, political stability, and cultural continuity. The reign of the Kushite pharaohs marked a turning point in the history of the ancient world. For the first time, the Kingdom of Kush was able to claim a dominant position on the world stage. Under the leadership of the Kushite kings, Egypt would see a period of political consolidation and renewal as the once great civilization was brought back to its former glory. But while the Kushite pharaohs were celebrated for their achievements in Egypt, they were also revered as heroes in their own land. They brought prosperity, stability, and cultural pride to their people, and their rule would be remembered as one of the golden ages of African civilization. However, the history of the Kingdom of Kush is not one of uninterrupted success. Like all great civilizations, it faced its own set of challenges. Over time, the once flourishing kingdom would begin to decline, weakened by internal strife and external pressures. The rise of powerful empires to the north and the east would gradually diminish Kush's influence, and by the end of the 4th century BCE, the kingdom would be reduced to a shadow of its former self. Despite this, the legacy of the Kingdom of Kush would live on, remembered not just in the monuments and ruins that remain today, but in the stories of the people who lived and thrived in this remarkable civilization. The Kingdom of Kush holds a special place in the history of Africa, not just as a precursor to the Egyptian Empire, but as a powerful and enduring civilization in its own right. While Egypt has long been the focus of historical study and attention, it is important to recognize that the Kingdom of Kush was not simply a vassal state or a footnote in the annals of history. It was a thriving and complex civilization that stood on its own, with its own unique identity, culture, and contributions to the world. In understanding the Kingdom of Kush, we also come to appreciate the broader narrative of African history, which has often been marginalized or misunderstood in traditional historical discourse. The story of Kush is one of resilience, innovation, and cultural pride, a story that deserves to be told with the same depth and attention as that of Egypt or any other great civilization. As we reflect on the rise and fall of this ancient kingdom, we are reminded that Africa's history is not just a story of the past. It is a living legacy that continues to shape the world today. The Kingdom of Kush's strategic position along the Nile River allowed it to develop a distinct identity from its northern neighbor, Egypt. While Egypt's influence on the region is well documented, the role of Kush in shaping the dynamics of the Nile Valley is less widely recognized. It is essential to understand the complex relationship between these two civilizations and how Kush navigated a world dominated by the powerful and often overbearing Egyptian state. Kush's early history is intertwined with the rise of Egyptian dynasties, yet the Kushites were never mere followers of their northern counterparts. Instead, they were powerful, proud, and autonomous people who, over time, crafted their own path. By the 2nd millennium BCE, the Kingdom of Kush had firmly established itself as a major political and cultural entity. The kingdom's rise is closely tied to the power dynamics of Nubia, the region lying south of Egypt. Initially, the Kushites maintained a delicate balance between cooperation and competition with Egypt, strategically aligning themselves with various Egyptian dynasties or, at times, resisting Egyptian encroachment. For much of the early history of Kush, Egypt served as both an inspiration and a formidable adversary. Despite this, the Kushites retained a sense of independence that would eventually allow them to become powerful rulers in their own right. The Kushites' deep connection to the land they inhabited is essential to understanding their resilience and identity. They were not simply a civilization that happened to be geographically situated in Nubia. They were defined by their relationship to this region, with its deserts, mountains, and, most importantly, the fertile lands along the Nile. The river was not just a source of life, but also a cultural and spiritual conduit. For the Kushites, the Nile served as both the lifeblood of their civilization and a sacred symbol, and their kings viewed themselves as the divine stewards of the land and its people. Their spiritual beliefs, rooted in the worship of gods such as Ammonius, Osiris, and Isis, were deeply connected to the Nile's cycles and the broader cosmology of the region. Over time, the Kushites began to exert more control over the territories to their north, increasingly coming into contact with Egypt. This led to a complex and often contentious relationship, with both cooperation and conflict characterizing the interactions between the two civilizations. As Egypt expanded its territories, it often sought to dominate the lands of Nubia, and the Kushites were forced to defend their independence. The nature of their military campaigns, however, was not solely defensive. They also took the offensive when they saw an opportunity to extend their influence. In particular, the 19th dynasty of Egypt saw an increasing number of military confrontations between the Egyptians and the Kushites. These conflicts were often the result of Egypt's desire to control the important trade routes that passed through Nubia and to exploit the region's rich resources, including gold, ivory, and precious stones. The Kushites, however, were not easily subdued. Their military tactics and weapons were sophisticated, and they were able to effectively counter Egypt's might on several occasions. One notable example of this was the Battle of Perunafur, where Kushite forces successfully repelled an Egyptian invasion. This victory not only demonstrated the strength of the Kushite military, but also marked a turning point in the region's power dynamics. As the centuries passed, the Kushites' ability to resist Egyptian control became a defining feature of their history. The rise of the new kingdom in Egypt, while bringing Egypt to the height of its imperial power, also saw the Kushites asserting their own dominance. During this period, the Kingdom of Kush controlled vast territories, including Upper Egypt. The power struggle between Egypt and Kush was not simply a matter of military conquest. It was also a struggle for cultural supremacy. The Kushites, though influenced by Egyptian art, religion, and architecture, retained a distinct cultural identity, one that was rooted in their Nubian heritage. Kush's kings were keenly aware of the importance of maintaining a balance between military might and diplomatic engagement. Their approach to power was often characterized by strategic alliances and political marriages, allowing them to expand their influence without resorting to constant warfare. The relationship between the two nations was not merely antagonistic. There were periods of cooperation and mutual respect. This diplomacy was, in part, due to the shared religious practices and rituals that both civilizations adhered to. The Kushites often sent tributes to Egypt's pharaohs, recognizing their authority but also asserting their own sovereignty. Despite these diplomatic gestures, tensions between the two civilizations continued to rise, particularly as Egypt began to experience a period of political instability and decline in the first millennium BCE. As Egypt weakened, Kush seized the opportunity to strengthen its position and extend its influence. The most significant moment in this period came when the Kushite king Pi, who ruled from his capital at Napata, embarked on a military campaign to Egypt. In 747 BCE, Pi conquered the Egyptian capital of Thebes and placed himself on the Egyptian throne, marking the beginning of the 25th dynasty of Egypt. This was a watershed moment in both Kushite and Egyptian history, as it marked the first time that a Nubian king had ruled Egypt. Under the rule of the 25th dynasty, the relationship between Egypt and Kush underwent a profound transformation. No longer were the Kushites simply a neighboring power resisting Egyptian dominance. They were now the rulers of Egypt. Pi and his successors, including Shabaka, Taharka, and Tanamani, are often referred to as the Kushite pharaohs because they reigned over both Egypt and Kush. During this period, Kushite rulers sought to restore Egypt's former glory, reviving many of the traditions and practices that had been lost during the period of political instability. They built monumental structures, including pyramids and temples, and engaged in religious rituals that emphasized the unity of the two lands. Their reign represented a cultural renaissance that sought to merge the rich heritage of Egypt with the strength and vitality of Kush. The 25th dynasty was a time of prosperity for both Egypt and Kush, but it was also a time of great internal and external challenges. As Egypt's political landscape shifted and external forces, such as the Assyrians, began to challenge the Kushite rulers, the stability of the Kingdom of Kush came into question. While the Kushite kings were able to secure significant victories, including the defense of Egypt against the Assyrians, the political and military pressures eventually led to the decline of the 25th dynasty. The Assyrians, under Tiglath-Pileser III, launched a series of devastating invasions, which eventually led to the collapse of the Kushite rule in Egypt by 656 BCE. Despite this, the Kingdom of Kush did not disappear. Although it lost control over Egypt, it continued to thrive in its southern territories, particularly in the region of Meroë. The Meroitic kingdom, which emerged after the fall of the 25th dynasty, would go on to become one of the most powerful African kingdoms of antiquity, lasting for several centuries. Even after the decline of the Meroitic kingdom, the legacy of the Kushites endured. Today, the monuments, pyramids, and artifacts left behind by the Kingdom of Kush stand as a testament to the strength, resilience, and enduring legacy of this ancient civilization. In many ways, the history of the Kingdom of Kush is a story of resilience and self-determination. Throughout the centuries, the Kushites demonstrated an ability to navigate the complex power dynamics of the Nile Valley while maintaining a fierce sense of identity and independence. Their ability to rise above external pressures and internal challenges allowed them to carve out their own place in history. And their story is one that continues to inspire and captivate historians, archaeologists, and people across the world. The Kingdom of Kush, located along the Nile River to the south of Egypt, was a land of remarkable beauty and strategic importance. Its people, the Kushites, were shaped by the geography of their homeland. The river, the desert, and the mountains that surrounded them created a unique environment that not only provided natural resources, but also defined their cultural, political, and spiritual life. The Kushites, though often overshadowed by the grandeur of Egypt, were not mere bystanders in the Nile Valley's history. They were the architects of a powerful civilization that would leave its mark on the world long before Egypt's greatness became widely recognized. Kush's early history was marked by an intricate relationship with Egypt. For much of their existence, the Kushites were influenced by Egyptian culture, especially in terms of religion, art, and architecture. However, they never allowed themselves to become wholly assimilated. They maintained their independence, despite repeated Egyptian attempts to conquer their land. The Kushites developed a unique blend of indigenous African traditions and Egyptian influences, which helped define their civilization. This cultural fusion was not only evident in their material culture, but also in their religious practices. Both Kush and Egypt worshipped similar gods, such as Ammonius, Osiris, and Isis, but the Kushites had their own interpretations and local variations of these deities. The Kingdom of Kush was at its peak during the time of the New Kingdom in Egypt, a period when Egypt was expanding its empire across the eastern Mediterranean and into Africa. Despite Egypt's dominance, the Kushites continued to thrive. Their land was rich in resources, particularly gold, which made them an essential partner in the trade networks that spanned the Nile Valley and beyond. The Kushites' access to gold, ivory, and other valuable commodities made them a crucial player in the ancient world's economy. However, their wealth and strategic position also made them a target for Egypt's imperial ambitions. Throughout the centuries, the relationship between Egypt and Kush was characterized by both cooperation and conflict. There were periods when the Kushites and Egyptians traded, intermarried, and shared religious practices. Yet, there were also times when the Kushites resisted Egyptian domination, defending their land against Egyptian invaders. The conflict between the two civilizations reached its zenith during the reign of the 25th dynasty in Egypt, a time when the Kushite kings rose to power and ruled over Egypt itself. The rise of the Kushite 25th dynasty marked a significant turning point in the history of both civilizations. Pi, the first of the Kushite pharaohs, led a successful military campaign into Egypt, conquering the country and establishing himself as pharaoh. Pi's rule marked the beginning of a new era in which Kushite kings would control Egypt, bringing with them a fresh perspective on governance, religion, and culture. Under the 25th dynasty, Egypt saw a revival of its ancient traditions, as the Kushite rulers sought to restore the greatness of Egypt's past. They built temples, pyramids, and monuments that harkened back to Egypt's golden age, even as they imposed their own vision on the land. The reign of the Kushite kings in Egypt was not without challenges. The Kushites faced external threats, most notably from the Assyrians, who were expanding their empire in the Near East. The Assyrians, under Tiglath-Pileser III and later Esarhaddon, launched a series of invasions against Egypt, seeking to overthrow the Kushite rulers. Despite the Kushites' military prowess, they were eventually forced to retreat from Egypt in the face of the Assyrian onslaught. The loss of Egypt marked the end of the 25th dynasty and the end of the Kushites' rule over Egypt. However, the fall of the 25th dynasty did not mean the end of the Kingdom of Kush. The Kushites returned to their homeland, where they continued to rule their kingdom from the city of Meroë, which became the new center of power in the region. Meroë, located on the banks of the Nile in modern-day Sudan, became the capital of the Meroitic kingdom and the heart of Kushite civilization. It was here that the Kushites built a new empire, one that would endure for several centuries. The Meroitic kingdom, sometimes called the Kingdom of Meroë, was a continuation of the traditions of the Kingdom of Kush, but it was also marked by new developments in culture, technology, and governance. The Meroitic kingdom became known for its iron production, which was far more advanced than that of other contemporary civilizations. Meroë's blacksmiths created weapons, tools, and everyday items from iron, which helped to strengthen the kingdom's military and economic power. The Meroitic kingdom also developed a unique script, known as the Meroitic script, which was used to write the Meroitic language. This script, which was a combination of hieroglyphic and alphabetic elements, was used for inscriptions on monuments, tombs, and temples. Although much of the Meroitic script remains undeciphered, the existence of this writing system shows the intellectual achievements of the Kushites and their desire to maintain their cultural identity. Despite the decline of the Meroitic kingdom in the 4th century CE, its contributions to the ancient world remain significant. In addition to their technological and intellectual achievements, the Kushites were also known for their architectural and artistic accomplishments. The Kingdom of Kush, like Egypt, was home to a rich tradition of monumental construction. The Kushites built impressive pyramids, temples, and palaces, many of which still stand today. The pyramids of Kush, located in the region of Nubia, are smaller, but no less impressive than those of Egypt. These pyramids, which serve as tombs for the royal family, were often adorned with elaborate carvings and inscriptions that depicted the life and achievements of the deceased. The architecture of Kush reflected the kingdom's religious beliefs and the power of the kings, who were seen as divine rulers. The art of the Kingdom of Kush was similarly influenced by Egypt but also developed its own distinctive style. Kushite art often depicted the kings and queens in a highly stylized manner, emphasizing their divine status and authority. The Kushites also produced intricate jewelry, pottery, and sculpture, many of which were used in religious ceremonies or as offerings to the gods. The art of Kush, like its architecture, was a reflection of the kingdom's spiritual and political ideals, and it continues to be studied and admired for its beauty and craftsmanship. The Kingdom of Kush was not only a regional power, but also an important player in the larger geopolitical landscape of the ancient world. Its connections with Egypt, the Near East, and other African kingdoms made it an essential part of the trade networks that span the Mediterranean and beyond. The wealth of the Kushites, derived from their control of trade routes and natural resources, allowed them to build a powerful military and a flourishing economy. While the kingdom's military strength was an important factor in its survival, it was the Kushites' ability to adapt to changing circumstances and to forge diplomatic and cultural ties with other civilizations that enabled them to maintain their independence for so long. In the end, the story of the Kingdom of Kush is one of resilience, innovation, and cultural pride. It was a civilization that faced countless challenges but never lost its sense of identity. Even as Egypt's power waned and the kingdom's influence in the region began to decline, the Kushites remained steadfast in their commitment to their traditions. Today, the remnants of the Kingdom of Kush, its pyramids, temples, and artifacts, serve as a testament to the strength and enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization. The Kingdom of Kush was not just a civilization that existed alongside Egypt. It was a civilization that helped shape the history of Africa and the world. Its story, though often overlooked, deserves to be remembered as one of the great chapters in the history of the ancient world. The Kingdom of Kush, despite its eventual fall from power in Egypt, continued to play an influential role in the broader African and Mediterranean world for centuries. After the decline of the 25th dynasty and the loss of Egypt to the Assyrians, the Kushite kings retreated to their homeland in Nubia, where they established a new capital at Meroë, located further south along the Nile River. This shift from Napata to Meroë marked a new chapter in the history of the Kingdom of Kush, one that would be defined by resilience, innovation, and the continuation of cultural and political traditions. The Kingdom of Meroë, which emerged after the end of the 25th dynasty, was not merely a continuation of the Old Kingdom, but represented a transformation in terms of its economic, political, and cultural structures. Meroë became the center of power for the Kushite rulers, and the city itself grew into a prosperous metropolis that would serve as the heart of a dynamic empire for over a millennium. The new capital was strategically located near the convergence of trade routes that ran through the heart of Africa, allowing the Kushites to control the flow of goods and resources, such as gold, ivory, and exotic animals, into the Mediterranean world. One of the most significant achievements of the Meroitic kingdom was its mastery of iron production. The region around Meroë became one of the world's earliest centers for the production of iron, with the Kushites developing advanced techniques that allowed them to create high-quality weapons, tools, and agricultural implements. This technological innovation gave the Kushite kings a distinct military advantage and allowed them to maintain a level of independence and power that many other civilizations of the time lacked. The iron industry not only strengthened the economy, but also provided the Kushites with the ability to expand their territory and influence through military campaigns and trade. The Meroitic kingdom was also marked by a remarkable degree of cultural and intellectual achievement. While the Kushites had long been influenced by Egyptian religion and art, they began to develop their own distinctive identity during the Meroitic period. The Meroitic script, a writing system that combined elements of Egyptian hieroglyphics and alphabetic characters, was created during this time. This script, though still not fully understood, is a testament to the Kushites' intellectual and artistic creativity. The Meroitic script was used to record the history, religious beliefs, and administrative matters of the kingdom, and inscriptions in this script can still be found on monuments and tombs throughout the region. The religious life of the Meroitic kingdom was similarly marked by both continuity and change. While the Kushites continued to worship many of the same gods as the Egyptians, such as Ammonius, Osiris, and Isis, they also incorporated local deities and religious practices into their worship. The Kushite kings, like their Egyptian predecessors, were seen as divine rulers, and their connection to the gods was central to their authority. Temples and shrines dedicated to the gods were constructed throughout the kingdom, with Meroë itself becoming the spiritual center of the Kushite world. The kings of Meroë often portrayed themselves as the earthly manifestations of the gods, and their rule was legitimized through religious rituals that were intended to maintain harmony between the divine and the human worlds. Despite the advancements in culture and technology, the Meroitic kingdom also faced significant challenges. The most pressing of these challenges came from external forces, particularly the growing power of the Roman Empire. Although the Kushites had long maintained a degree of independence from Egypt, the rise of Rome in the Mediterranean world created new pressures for the Meroitic kingdom. The Romans, who had already absorbed Egypt into their empire, sought to extend their influence southward into Nubia, and several military confrontations occurred between the Meroitic kingdom and Roman forces. These conflicts were not limited to battles and skirmishes. They also involved diplomatic maneuvering and attempts to forge alliances with other powerful states in the region. One of the most famous encounters between the Romans and the Kushites took place during the reign of the Meroitic king, King Nastasin, in the 1st century BCE. The Roman Empire, under Augustus, attempted to expand its control over the region south of Egypt, and this led to a confrontation with the Kushites, who sought to maintain their independence. While the exact details of the encounter remain unclear, it is believed that the Kushites were able to successfully resist Roman advances, and the Romans ultimately refrained from further military intervention in the region. This victory not only secured the sovereignty of the Meroitic kingdom, but also enhanced the prestige of the Kushite rulers, who were seen as the only African kingdom capable of standing up to the might of Rome. In addition to external pressures, the Meroitic kingdom also faced internal challenges. The political structure of the kingdom, though initially strong, became more decentralized over time. As the kingdom expanded, it became increasingly difficult for the central authority in Meroë to maintain control over distant provinces. Local rulers, or vassals, began to assert more independence, and the power of the king began to wane. This decentralization of power eventually contributed to the kingdom's decline, as internal divisions and external threats combined to weaken the once great civilization. The Meroitic kingdom's decline was also influenced by changes in the broader environment. The region around Meroë, which had once been fertile and well-watered by the Nile River, began to experience periods of drought and environmental degradation. These environmental changes affected agriculture, the backbone of the Kushite economy, and led to food shortages and economic instability. As the kingdom's economy weakened, so too did its military and political power, and by the 4th century CE, the Meroitic kingdom was in decline. The rise of neighboring kingdoms and the increasing pressure from Roman expansion eventually led to the fall of the Meroitic kingdom, although its legacy continued to influence the region for centuries. Despite its eventual decline, the Meroitic kingdom left behind a remarkable cultural and architectural legacy. The pyramids of Meroë, which are among the most iconic and well-preserved structures in Africa, stand as a testament to the kingdom's architectural prowess and its deep connection to its past. These pyramids, much smaller than those of Egypt, were built as tombs for the royal family and are adorned with inscriptions and carvings that tell the story of the Meroitic rulers. The city of Meroë itself, with its temples, palaces, and ironworks, continues to be an important archaeological site, offering valuable insights into the life and culture of the Kushites. The legacy of the Kingdom of Kush extends beyond its physical remnants. The cultural and intellectual achievements of the Meroitic period influenced neighboring civilizations, and the kingdom's military prowess, technological innovations, and artistic traditions left an indelible mark on the history of Africa. The Kushite rulers, through their mastery of iron production, their military resilience, and their commitment to preserving their cultural identity, demonstrated the power of a civilization that could stand up to the greatest empires of the ancient world. Today, the story of the Kingdom of Kush serves as a reminder of Africa's long and complex history, one that deserves recognition alongside the great civilizations of the ancient Mediterranean world. The Kushites, with their resilience and innovation, remain an essential chapter in the history of the African continent and the broader world. The Kingdom of Kush, which rose to prominence long before the rise of many other ancient civilizations, was a land that embodied both strength and adaptability. Despite facing numerous challenges, both external and internal, the Kushites remained a force to be reckoned with throughout their history. The Meroitic period, which followed the fall of the 25th dynasty in Egypt, marked a new chapter for the Kingdom of Kush. While the Meroitic kingdom enjoyed prosperity and was a center of trade and culture, it also faced growing pressures from surrounding civilizations, environmental changes, and internal divisions that ultimately led to its decline. Yet, even in its decline, the legacy of the Kingdom of Kush endured, leaving an indelible imprint on the ancient world. The Meroitic kingdom, which existed from approximately 300 BCE to 350 CE, was a powerful state that controlled vast territories along the Nile River. Its capital, Meroë, became a thriving urban center known for its architectural marvels, iron production, and artistic achievements. The city's strategic location allowed the Kushites to dominate important trade routes, connecting sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world. The wealth generated from the kingdom's control of gold, ivory, and other precious resources made Meroë one of the most influential cities in the ancient world. This wealth also enabled the Kushite rulers to maintain a well-organized state that thrived through military conquests, trade, and cultural exchange. Iron production became one of the key factors in the success of the Meroitic kingdom. The Kushites were among the earliest civilizations to develop large-scale ironworking, producing high-quality iron goods that were highly sought after throughout the ancient world. The ironworks at Meroë became the heart of the kingdom's economy, providing the tools, weapons, and agricultural implements that enabled the kingdom to maintain its military power and economic prosperity. The kingdom's blacksmiths were highly skilled, and their craft became an important part of Kushite identity. The production of iron weapons helped the Kushite army to defend its borders and maintain control over conquered territories. The influence of Egyptian culture remained deeply embedded in the Meroitic kingdom, but the Kushites also began to assert their own distinctive identity during this period. The Meroitic rulers were keenly aware of the legacy of their Egyptian ancestors, but they sought to differentiate themselves by embracing their Nubian heritage. The Meroitic script, a unique writing system developed in the kingdom, was one of the most significant innovations of this era. Combining Egyptian hieroglyphs with an alphabetic system, the Meroitic script allowed the Kushites to record their history, religious beliefs, and royal decrees. Although the script has yet to be fully deciphered, its existence is a testament to the intellectual achievements of the Kushites. Religion continued to play a central role in the Meroitic kingdom, with the rulers of Meroë often portrayed as divine figures with a direct connection to the gods. The worship of Ammonius, the supreme god of the Nile Valley, remained central to Kushite religious practices, though the Meroitic rulers also adopted new gods and religious ideas. The Kushites built magnificent temples and monuments dedicated to their gods, and their kings were buried in elaborate tombs adorned with inscriptions and offerings. The religious and spiritual significance of these structures cannot be overstated, as they not only reflected the power of the kings, but also their belief in the divine order of the universe. In the Meroitic period, the rulers of Kush saw themselves as the earthly representatives of the gods, and their power was seen as divinely ordained. Despite its many achievements, the Meroitic kingdom began to show signs of internal fragmentation as it entered the 3rd and 4th century CE. The political structure of the kingdom, which had once been highly centralized, began to weaken as local rulers gained more autonomy. This decentralization of power led to growing tensions between the central authority in Meroë and the regional governors. As the kingdom's territories grew, it became increasingly difficult for the kings to maintain control over distant provinces, leading to the rise of local elites who were more interested in their own power than in maintaining loyalty to the central government. This fragmentation weakened the cohesion of the kingdom and made it vulnerable to external threats. Externally, the Meroitic kingdom faced increasing pressure from neighboring powers. The rise of the Roman Empire had significant implications for the Kingdom of Kush. While the Kushites had successfully resisted Roman expansion during the reign of Augustus, the Romans were not the only external force with an interest in Nubia. To the south of Kush, the Kingdom of Aksum, a rising power in the Red Sea region, began to challenge Kushite influence. The Aksumites, who had developed a strong economy based on trade and the export of gold, ivory, and other goods, posed a serious threat to the Meroitic kingdom's dominance in the region. The Aksumites eventually defeated the Meroites and took control of Nubia, marking the end of the Meroitic kingdom's power. Environmental factors also played a role in the decline of the Meroitic kingdom. The region around Meroë, once fertile and conducive to agriculture, began to experience periods of drought and desertification. These environmental changes had a detrimental effect on the kingdom's agricultural output, which was the backbone of its economy. As crops failed and food became scarce, the kingdom's ability to sustain its population and military power was compromised. The shifting climate also made the Meroitic kingdom more vulnerable to external attacks. As weakened by internal divisions and environmental stress, the kingdom was less able to defend itself. As the Meroitic kingdom began to crumble, its cultural and architectural achievements, however, continued to endure. The pyramids of Meroë, smaller and more numerous than those of Egypt, stand as a testament to the kingdom's architectural genius and its reverence for the dead. These pyramids, which were constructed as tombs for the royal family, were adorned with carvings that told the story of the lives and accomplishments of the kings and queens buried there. The pyramids were not just burial sites. They were symbolic representations of the Kushite belief in the afterlife, a place where the rulers would continue to exert power even after death. The royal tombs in Meroë, along with the temples and palaces that dotted the landscape, continue to draw the attention of archaeologists and historians who marvel at the sophistication and artistry of the Kushites. Though the kingdom of Meroë came to an end, its legacy did not fade completely. The Meroitic period left behind a rich cultural heritage that influenced subsequent civilizations in Africa and beyond. The ironworking techniques developed by the Kushites were passed down through the centuries, and their artistic and architectural traditions served as a model for future generations. Even the Meroitic script, though largely unreadable, remains a powerful symbol of the kingdom's intellectual and cultural achievements. The fall of the Meroitic kingdom did not erase the significance of the Kingdom of Kush. Rather, it became a part of the broader historical narrative of the Nile Valley and the African continent. In the centuries following the decline of the Meroitic kingdom, the region would experience the rise of new kingdoms, such as the Kingdom of Aksum and the Nubian Christian kingdoms. These new powers would build on the legacy of the Kushites, integrating elements of Kushite culture and traditions into their own civilizations. The story of the Kingdom of Kush, though often overlooked in mainstream historical narratives, is one of resilience, innovation, and cultural pride. The Kushites were not merely a people who faded into obscurity. They were a civilization that contributed significantly to the development of African and world history. The Kingdom of Kush's history, from its early rise to its decline in the Meroitic period, remains a vital chapter in the story of Africa. Its enduring legacy, seen in its monumental architecture, its technological innovations, and its complex social and religious systems, continues to capture the imagination of those who seek to understand the ancient past. The Kingdom of Kush may no longer be a dominant power in the Nile Valley, but its contributions to human civilization remain timeless, a testament to the strength and enduring spirit of the Kushite people. The Kingdom of Kush had long been a land where ancient traditions met innovative advancements. From its early days in the southern Nile Valley, through its rise to prominence as a rival to Egypt, and into the Meroitic period, it stood as a beacon of resilience and adaptation. However, as the Kingdom of Kush entered its later years, the strain of external pressures and internal divisions began to take their toll. The Meroitic kingdom, once a powerful and thriving empire, saw the signs of its decline emerge in subtle shifts, gradual disintegration rather than a singular cataclysmic fall. The Meroitic period, defined by cultural flourishing, technological mastery, and political power, ended not in a single battle, but in a slow erosion of its influence, culminating in the eventual annexation of Nubia by its rising neighbors. The decline of Meroë was a complex process driven by multiple factors, including external invasions, economic strains, environmental changes, and political fragmentation. The Meroitic kingdom, which began as a powerful force in Nubia, enjoyed an era of prosperity in its earlier centuries, marked by innovations in ironworking, architectural accomplishments, and religious life. As Meroë grew in wealth and stature, it became a central hub in the trade routes of northeastern Africa, connecting sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds. The kingdom's control over gold, ivory, and other commodities ensured its position in the broader ancient world. Moreover, the Kushites had established a form of governance that drew from Egyptian influence while also asserting a unique Nubian identity, evident in their script, royal iconography, and spiritual practices. Their ability to forge and maintain alliances with other African kingdoms, while also engaging in military conquests when necessary, was a testament to their strategic acumen. Despite these successes, the Meroitic kingdom faced mounting internal problems, one of which was the increasing decentralization of power. As Meroë expanded, the centralized authority that had once governed the kingdom began to weaken. Local rulers, or nobility, gained increasing control over their territories, often with little regard for the overarching authority of the Meroitic king. This fragmentation made it difficult for the kingdom's leadership to maintain a cohesive strategy in the face of both external and internal pressures. Regionalism, with its competing local elites and independent factions, diluted the power of the central monarchy, leading to a gradual loss of cohesion within the kingdom. At the same time, the Meroitic kingdom was increasingly vulnerable to external forces. The rise of the Aksumite Empire to the south, with its growing economic, military, and political power, posed a significant challenge to the Kushites. Aksum's rapid expansion and its own control over valuable trade routes put on a collision course with the Meroitic kingdom. By the 4th century CE, the Aksumites began encroaching on the Kushite territories. They had already established themselves as a dominant force along the Red Sea coast, controlling access to crucial trade routes and their growing influence in the region threatened the Kushites' monopoly on resources and commerce. The decline of the Meroitic kingdom was also compounded by the growing pressures from the Christianization of the region. The kingdom of Aksum, after all, had embraced Christianity by the early 4th century CE, and this religious shift gradually altered the political and cultural landscape of northeastern Africa. The rise of Christian influence in Aksum made the traditional religious beliefs of the Kushites increasingly at odds with the growing power of their neighbors. Although the Meroites maintained their indigenous beliefs and practices, their religious and cultural unity was slowly undermined by the spread of Christianity. Alongside the rise of Aksum and religious changes, environmental challenges also played a significant role in the decline of Meroë. The environment surrounding the Meroitic kingdom began to shift, with prolonged periods of drought, desertification, and diminishing agricultural yields. The once fertile Nile Valley, which had sustained the kingdom for centuries, began to show signs of strain. The region's traditional agricultural practices, which had supported large populations, were no longer as effective as they once were. As food resources became scarce and the kingdom's economic foundations weakened, the Kushites found themselves increasingly vulnerable to both internal dissent and external aggression. Moreover, the decline in agriculture contributed to a broader economic collapse that affected the Meroitic kingdom's ability to sustain its military power. The wealth generated from gold and other commodities had long allowed the Kushites to maintain a formidable army. But as these resources dwindled and the economy became strained, the kingdom could no longer rely on its military strength to repel foreign invaders. As Aksum's power expanded, the Meroitic kingdom was forced into a defensive position, unable to project the military power it had once wielded so effectively. This decline in military capability made it difficult for the Kushites to resist external threats, such as the Aksumites and the encroaching influence of the Romans. The eventual fall of the Meroitic kingdom was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual process of erosion from within and without. Aksum, with its superior military and economic resources, succeeded in defeating the Meroites, effectively bringing an end to the Meroitic period of the Kingdom of Kush. By the 4th century CE, Aksum had taken control of key regions in Nubia, effectively dismantling the Meroitic kingdom's hold on its former territories. The fall of Meroë marked the end of an era for the Kingdom of Kush, but it also symbolized the shifting balance of power in northeastern Africa. The Aksumite Empire, now ascendant, would carry forward many of the legacies of the Kushites, particularly in terms of trade and the connection to the Mediterranean world. However, the direct political and cultural influence of the Meroitic kingdom would fade, replaced by the rising power of the Aksumites. While the decline of the Meroitic kingdom is often seen as a tragic end to an era of Kushite greatness, it is essential to understand that the legacy of the Kingdom of Kush did not disappear with its fall. The contributions of the Kushites to African civilization, particularly in the fields of architecture, religion, art, and ironworking, continued to influence future generations. Even after the fall of Meroë, the history of the Kingdom of Kush remained a vital part of African heritage, one that would shape the cultures of later African kingdoms. The Kushite pyramids, the technological advancements in ironworking, and the cultural traditions that had defined the kingdom left a lasting imprint on the peoples of the Nile Valley and the surrounding regions. Additionally, the memory of the Kingdom of Kush endured through the narratives and oral traditions of the people who lived in the wake of its decline. Successive African civilizations, particularly in Sudan and Ethiopia, maintained a cultural connection to the ancient Kushite traditions. The Aksumites, inheriting much from the Meroitic kingdom, continued to emphasize trade, military prowess, and religious importance as foundations of their empire. In this way, the Kushite legacy was not forgotten. Rather, it evolved as part of the broader tapestry of African history. Even in the broader historical context, the Kingdom of Kush stands out as an important chapter in the development of African civilizations. The success of the Kingdom of Kush, from its early rise to its eventual fall, showcases the capacity of African civilizations to thrive and adapt in the face of shifting geopolitical landscapes. The story of the Kingdom of Kush is one of resilience, creativity, and endurance, providing a deep well of lessons for understanding the long arc of African history. In retrospect, the Kingdom of Kush may have ultimately been eclipsed by the rise of new powers like Aksum and later Islamic empires in the region, but its story is far from one of defeat. It was a kingdom that had once ruled vast territories, fostered a rich cultural life, and contributed to the shaping of Africa's historical identity. The fall of the Meroitic kingdom, therefore, should not obscure the remarkable achievements of the Kushites. Their legacy continues to resonate in the archaeological sites, in the stories of their kings and queens, and in the enduring cultural practices that have survived the centuries. The Kingdom of Kush may have declined, but its impact on the history of Africa and the world remains undiminished. The Kingdom of Kush, a civilization that once flourished in the heart of Africa along the Nile River, stands as one of the most fascinating yet often overlooked chapters of ancient history. It was a land that witnessed the rise of a powerful and resilient people who, despite being located to the south of Egypt, played an integral role in the shaping of the ancient world. From its early history as a kingdom that fought to maintain its sovereignty against the might of Egypt, to its golden era during the Meroitic period, the Kingdom of Kush represents a civilization defined by both its strengths and vulnerabilities. The decline of the Meroitic kingdom marked the end of an era for Kush, but the kingdom's rich legacy persisted long after its fall. As we reflect on the kingdom's story, it becomes evident that the Kushites were not simply survivors of history. They were active creators, shapers of their culture, and participants in the broader narrative of African civilization. The Kingdom of Kush's early history is marked by its relationship with Egypt, which, despite being a neighbor and often a rival, greatly influenced Kushite culture. As early as the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, around 2000 BCE, the Kushites were known as formidable opponents who defended their land from Egyptian military campaigns. However, it was the development of Nubia as a region that defined the early phase of the kingdom's identity. The Nubians, as the Kushites were often called, occupied a strategic and vital part of northeastern Africa. Their control of the Nile's southernmost reaches gave them access to essential trade routes that connected sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world. The Kingdom of Kush first emerged as a significant power under the rule of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, during a period of political instability and internal strife. The Kushites, led by their kings, became powerful allies or formidable enemies to the Egyptians, depending on the shifting tides of diplomacy and warfare. Throughout this time, the Kushites were heavily influenced by Egyptian art, religion, and architecture, and many Kushite rulers adopted Egyptian titles and royal iconography, attempting to position themselves as worthy heirs to the pharaohs of Egypt. Despite this, the Kushites managed to retain their own distinct identity and, over time, would come to challenge Egypt for dominance in the region. The 25th dynasty of Egypt, which was founded by the Kushite king Pi, marked the peak of Kushite power. In the 8th century BCE, Pi launched a military campaign that resulted in his conquest of Egypt and his ascension to the throne as pharaoh. This period of Kushite rule over Egypt is often referred to as the Kushite dynasty or the Black Pharaohs, as it marked a time when African rulers ruled over one of the world's most powerful civilizations. Pi and his successors, such as Shabaka, Taharka, and Tanamani, sought to restore Egypt's ancient glory by rebuilding temples, reviving religious practices, and emphasizing the continuity of Egyptian culture and traditions. Under the Kushite pharaohs, Egypt enjoyed a period of stability and cultural revival. However, the success of the Kushite rulers in Egypt also set the stage for the kingdom's eventual decline. While the Kushite kings of the 25th dynasty were able to restore many of the traditions of the ancient Egyptian past, their reign was marked by internal strife and external threats. The Kingdom of Kush found itself facing new challenges from both within and outside its borders. The Assyrians, a rising power to the northeast, had begun expanding their empire in the Near East and had set their sights on Egypt. In the 7th century BCE, The Assyrian king Esarhaddon launched a campaign to take Egypt, and despite the valiant resistance of the Kushites, they were forced to retreat from the Egyptian throne. After the fall of the 25th dynasty, the Kingdom of Kush continued to thrive in its southern heartland. Although they no longer ruled over Egypt, the Kushites maintained their position as the dominant power in Nubia. The capital of Meroë became the new center of the kingdom's political and cultural life. Meroë, located further south along the Nile, became a prosperous and thriving city-state that rivaled any city in the ancient world. The Meroitic kingdom continued to maintain its sovereignty and expanded its influence through trade, diplomacy, and military conquests. The city of Meroë was strategically positioned to control the trade routes that ran through the Nile Valley, linking it to the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, and the interior of Africa. The kingdom's wealth derived from the resources it controlled, including gold, ivory, and exotic animals, as well as its expertise in ironworking, which became a major industry in Meroë. One of the most striking features of the Meroitic kingdom was its advancement in iron technology. The Kushites had learned to master the art of ironworking, which allowed them to produce high-quality tools, weapons, and implements. Meroë became one of the earliest centers of iron production in Africa, and the Kushites' ability to create iron weapons gave them a distinct military advantage. The kingdom's blacksmiths, highly skilled in their craft, produced iron weapons that were sought after across the ancient world. This technological innovation played a key role in the kingdom's success and allowed it to maintain a powerful military that could defend its borders and expand its territory. The Meroitic period also marked a period of significant cultural and religious development. The Kushites continued to worship many of the same gods as the Egyptians, particularly Ammonius, who had become the chief deity of the kingdom. However, over time, the Meroitic rulers began to assert their own distinctive identity, incorporating local deities and customs into their religious practices. The Meroitic script, developed during this period, is one of the most significant contributions of the kingdom. A mixture of hieroglyphic symbols and alphabetic characters, the Meroitic script was used to record royal decrees, religious texts, and historical events. Although the script remains undeciphered to this day, it stands as a symbol of the intellectual achievements of the Kushites. The Meroitic kingdom was also known for its monumental architecture, particularly the pyramids that dotted the landscape of Nubia. These pyramids, built as tombs for the royal family, were smaller than the famous pyramids of Egypt, but they were no less impressive. The architecture of the Kushite pyramids reflected the kingdom's reverence for its rulers and its belief in the afterlife. The pyramids were adorned with intricate carvings and inscriptions that depicted the lives of the kings and queens buried within them. These monumental structures, along with the temples and palaces of Meroë, continue to serve as a testament to the grandeur of the Kushite civilization. Despite its cultural and technological achievements, the Meroitic kingdom began to experience challenges as it entered the 4th century CE. The rise of the Aksumite Empire to the south, with its control over key trade routes and its growing influence in the region, posed a significant threat to the Kushites. The Aksumites, who had embraced Christianity by the early 4th century, expanded their empire into Nubia, gradually asserting control over the territories that had once belonged to the Kingdom of Kush. By the late 4th century CE, the Aksumites had effectively defeated the Meroites, and the Kingdom of Kush ceased to exist as a major power in the region. The decline of the Meroitic kingdom was also influenced by internal factors, including political fragmentation, economic difficulties, and environmental changes. As the kingdom's territories expanded, local rulers and regional elites gained more autonomy, leading to a weakening of central authority. The traditional agricultural economy of the Meroitic kingdom, based on the fertile lands of the Nile, began to suffer as periods of drought and environmental degradation affected food production. As the kingdom's economic base weakened, its military power diminished, and it became increasingly vulnerable to external threats. The fall of the Meroitic kingdom marked the end of an era for the Kingdom of Kush. However, the legacy of the Kushites endured long after their political power waned. The influence of Kush can be seen in the cultures of neighboring African kingdoms, particularly the Kingdom of Aksum, which adopted many elements of Kushite religion, art, and architecture. The pyramids of Meroë, with their distinctive style, continue to stand as a powerful reminder of the Kingdom of Kush's legacy. Even as the Meroitic kingdom faded from power, its contributions to African civilization, particularly in the areas of ironworking, religion, and art, continue to inspire and influence future generations. In the broader context of African history, the Kingdom of Kush stands as one of the earliest and most enduring civilizations on the continent. It was a civilization that survived through conquest, adapted to changing circumstances, and contributed significantly to the development of the ancient world. The story of Kush, from its rise to power to its eventual fall, is a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of its people. While the Kingdom of Kush may no longer be a dominant power, its legacy remains an important part of the history of Africa and the world. The Kingdom of Kush, once one of the most formidable powers in northeastern Africa, played a crucial role in shaping the history of the ancient world. Stretching along the Nile River to the south of Egypt, Kush was a kingdom defined by its resilience, ingenuity, and deep connection to the land that sustained it. As the Kushite civilization evolved over centuries, it encountered various internal and external challenges that shaped its trajectory, ultimately leading to its decline. However, even in its fall, the legacy of the Kingdom of Kush endured, influencing subsequent civilizations in Africa and beyond. The story of Kush is not simply one of rise and fall, but one of cultural continuity, innovation, and adaptation. The earliest foundations of Kush date back to the prehistoric period, when the region that would become the kingdom was inhabited by various Nubian tribes. These early communities lived in the fertile Nile Valley, taking advantage of the natural resources of the region, including the abundant wildlife, fertile soil, and access to trade routes that ran through the Nile. The early Kushites were known for their skills in farming, metalworking, and pottery. As these communities grew, they began to develop complex social and political structures, eventually leading to the formation of a unified kingdom. This nascent political entity began to take shape around the 2nd millennium BCE, laying the groundwork for what would become the Kingdom of Kush. The relationship between Kush and Egypt has long been a subject of interest to historians and archaeologists. The Kingdom of Kush shared a long and complex history with Egypt, marked by periods of cooperation and conflict. While the Kushites were often influenced by Egyptian culture, art, and religion, they also maintained their own distinct identity, rooted in the traditions of Nubia. The geographical proximity of the two civilizations meant that their destinies were often intertwined. The Kushites were heavily influenced by Egyptian religious practices, particularly the worship of the god Ammonius, whose cult became central to Kushite religious life. However, despite these cultural similarities, the Kushites never fully succumbed to Egyptian domination. During the New Kingdom period in Egypt, the Kushites were often seen as rivals, as Egypt sought to expand its empire southward into Nubia. The Kushites resisted Egyptian advances, and their independence was a key factor in the survival of their civilization. In the 8th century BCE, a pivotal moment in the history of Kush occurred when the Kushite king Pi ascended to the throne. Pi was a formidable leader, and his military campaigns would become legendary. Pi's forces moved northward, defeating Egyptian rulers and ultimately claiming the title of Pharaoh of Egypt. This marked the beginning of the 25th dynasty, often referred to as the Kushite dynasty or the Black Pharaohs. Under Pi's rule, the Kingdom of Kush achieved a level of political and cultural prominence that had never been seen before. Pi's victory over Egypt was not merely a military conquest. It was a political and cultural statement that solidified Kushite dominance over the region. Pi's reign marked the beginning of a golden age for Kush. His successors, including Shabaka, Taharqa, and Tanamani, continued to rule Egypt for nearly a century, ushering in a period of stability and revival for both Egypt and Kush. During this time, many of Egypt's ancient traditions were restored, including the construction of monumental architecture and the reviving of religious practices that had been in decline for centuries. The Kushites sought to restore Egypt to its former glory, seeing themselves as the legitimate heirs of the Egyptian pharaohs. Despite the successes of the 25th dynasty, the Kushite rulers faced constant external threats, particularly from the Assyrians. The Assyrian Empire, a rising power in the Near East, sought to expand its control over Egypt, and by the 7th century BCE, the Assyrian king Esarhaddon launched a series of military campaigns against the Kushites. The Assyrians, with their superior military technology and tactics, eventually forced the Kushites to retreat from Egypt. The loss of Egypt was a significant blow to the Kingdom of Kush, but it did not mark the end of the kingdom itself. The Kushites withdrew to their homeland in Nubia, where they continued to maintain a strong presence in the region. After the retreat from Egypt, the capital of the Kingdom of Kush was moved to Meroë, located further south along the Nile River. Meroë would become the heart of Kushite civilization during the Meroitic period, a time that saw the kingdom continue to flourish despite its loss of Egypt. Meroë was strategically located near key trade routes, giving the Kushites access to resources such as gold, ivory, and other valuable commodities. This access to resources allowed the kingdom to maintain a prosperous economy, and Meroë became an important center of trade and culture in the ancient world. The Meroitic period is known for its advancements in technology, particularly in the field of ironworking. The Kushites became masters of iron production, and Meroë was one of the earliest centers of ironworking in Africa. This technological prowess allowed the Kushites to create high-quality tools, weapons, and other goods that were in high demand throughout the ancient world. The Meroitic kingdom was also a cultural hub, where a unique blend of Egyptian, Nubian, and indigenous African traditions came together. The Meroitic script, which was developed during this period, is one of the most significant cultural achievements of the Kushites. Although the script remains largely undeciphered, it is a testament to the kingdom's intellectual and artistic achievements. The Kushites also continued to build monumental structures, including pyramids and temples, that reflected both their Nubian heritage and their reverence for Egyptian traditions. These structures, many of which are still standing today, provide valuable insights into the religion and culture of the Kushites. Religion continued to play a central role in Kushite society, with the worship of gods such as Ammonius, Osiris, and Isis remaining dominant throughout the Meroitic period. However, as the Meroitic kingdom matured, the Kushites began to incorporate new deities and religious practices into their belief system. This syncretism reflected the kingdom's ongoing efforts to assert its distinct identity while still acknowledging the influence of neighboring civilizations, particularly Egypt. The rulers of Meroë, like their Egyptian predecessors, were seen as divine figures, and their authority was legitimized through religious rituals and ceremonies. Despite its cultural and technological achievements, the Meroitic kingdom faced growing challenges as it entered the 4th and 5th century CE. The rise of the Aksumite Empire to the south posed a significant threat to the Kushites. The Aksumites, who had gained control of important trade routes and had embraced Christianity, began to encroach on Kushite territory. By the 4th century CE, the Aksumites had successfully defeated the Kushites and taken control of Nubia, effectively ending the Meroitic kingdom. The decline of Meroë marked the end of the Kingdom of Kush as a major power in the region, but its influence continued to be felt throughout northeastern Africa. The fall of the Meroitic kingdom is often attributed to a combination of factors, including external military pressure from the Aksumites, internal political fragmentation, and environmental challenges. The shift in trade routes, the loss of access to vital resources, and the rise of rival powers in the region all contributed to the weakening of the kingdom's power. Moreover, the Kushites, like many ancient civilizations, faced environmental challenges such as drought and desertification, which affected their agricultural economy and further diminished their ability to sustain their military and political influence. Even though the Kingdom of Kush eventually fell to external and internal pressures, its legacy remains an integral part of African history. The contributions of the Kushites to technology, art, architecture, and religion had a lasting impact on subsequent civilizations in Africa and the Mediterranean. The pyramids of Meroë, the advancements in ironworking, and the unique cultural and religious practices of the Kushites continue to captivate the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and scholars around the world. The story of the Kingdom of Kush is a testament to the resilience, creativity, and endurance of the African people who built it, leaving behind a legacy that transcends time and borders.